Late one evening, a young couple found themselves driving along an isolated country road, the night pressing in on all sides. As the hours wore on, the road seemed to stretch endlessly, flanked by towering trees that cast long, creeping shadows. The deeper they drove into the unknown, the darker the night seemed to grow. Eventually, their car began to sputter, jerking violently before the engine gave out entirely. The boyfriend glanced at the fuel gauge. It was empty. He turned the key again and again, but the car refused to start. The girlfriend's panic rose as the realization hit. They were stranded, far from civilization, and the clock had long since ticked past midnight. Stepping out of the car, the boyfriend surveyed their surroundings. The dense forest loomed around them, silent and oppressive. There were no signs of houses, lights, or life, just an endless stretch of trees disappearing into darkness. "It's okay," he reassured her, though his voice betrayed a hint of unease. "I'll walk back to the main road and get help. Just lock the doors and don't open them for anyone but me." She pleaded with him not to leave, but he gently kissed her forehead, promising to return quickly. Then he disappeared into the night, his figure swallowed by the shadows. Hours crept by. The girl sat in the locked car, her nerves on edge. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs made her heart race. The isolation weighed on her, and the minutes stretched into eternity. She hugged herself tightly, her fear deepening with each passing moment. Suddenly, a sound broke through the silence. Her breath caught. The sound was coming from the roof of the car. She froze, straining to hear, but her trembling hands couldn't stop the pounding of her own heartbeat. It was rhythmic, deliberate. Her imagination ran wild, but fear rooted her to her seat. She wanted to look, to know what was causing the sound, but the darkness outside was impenetrable. So she stayed put, the tapping persisting through the night. Finally, exhaustion overtook her, and she fell into a fitful sleep. When she woke, daylight had arrived, but her surroundings were eerily cloaked in darkness. Confused, she tried to peer out of the car only to realize the windows were completely blacked out. Before she could make sense of it, a loud honk shattered the silence. A car had pulled up nearby and a man's voice called out, "This is the police. Is anyone in the car?" Relief surged through her. "Yes, it's just me," she cried. "My boyfriend left to get help, but he never came back." "All right," the officer replied. His voice was calm but firm. "Listen carefully. Open the door, step out, and walk towards me. Whatever you do, don't look back." She hesitated but nodded, her hands trembling as she unlocked the door. The fresh air felt cold and heavy as she stepped out. "Keep walking," the officer instructed, his tone growing more urgent. "And don't turn around." Her steps were shaky, her instincts screaming to look back. What was behind her? Why was he so insistent? Curiosity clawed at her. "Don't look back!" The officer shouted again, but the words only fueled her fear. Unable to resist, she stopped and turned. Her scream tore through the still morning air. There, dangling just above the car, was her boyfriend's lifeless body. He hung upside down, his head severed, and blood dripping steadily from his neck onto the car roof. The source of the relentless tapping. The officer rushed forward, but the girl's screams echoed through the forest. A haunting sound that marked the end of an ordinary night turned into a waking nightmare.